Well, there's been another arrest. Another Columbia student was arrested for protesting. There might be a little bit more to that story, maybe an overstay of a visa or something along those lines. But there's definitely a crackdown of students who are expressing their solidarity with Palestine, students who criticize Israel. There is definitely a crackdown going on. Joining us now is Elijah Kallenberg and Jad Hashem, who are we've had them on the show before. They're with the organization Atidna International. And Jad is a Palestinian American student at the University of Texas, Austin. Elijah is a Jewish student currently studying at also the University of Texas, Austin. And they've come together in this organization to bring about and facilitate, a oneness and solidarity and also just understanding between the two groups. Elijah, Jad, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Kim.
Tensions are high. Thank you guys so much for being back on. I really want to get your perspective on how this is affecting, how this crackdown now with the Trump administration is affecting students, just the relations between the two groups, between just students in general, how people are feeling. I don't know which one of you wants to jump in on that, but this just seems, especially if you're not so Jad, just to be clear, are you an American citizen?
I am an American citizen, yes. I was born in the U.S.
Okay, so you're not at risk. Yeah, well, yet. I mean, they start.
Yeah, correct. No. Yeah.
With the ones who are not, and then they go after all of us, calling us all terrorists, right?
Sure.
What's the climate? But I mean, is everybody afraid?
Yeah, do you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. We know it's interesting, I guess, right? Because around a year ago at UT, we saw really big protests. It was some of the biggest on any college campus, really, and it was interesting to see just the size of the crowds that we had. And our university was very quick to shut down protests. So, of course, we being at the state capitol, we have Governor Abbott sitting pretty much right across from our university in the state of Texas, and he was very quick to shut things down. And our Palestine Solidarity Committee ended up having to be banned from campus, because of these orders. And our university president collaborated to get that done. And so, since then, we haven't had big protests really at our university. But I will say, I've spoken to a number of students, Arab students specifically, who some of them not born in the U.S., some of them, their parents not citizens, and a lot of them are fearful because they were involved in protests. I was somebody, I mentioned I'm a U.S. citizen. I was born in Dallas, and my parents were citizens when I was born. So, crossing the fingers, I'm pretty sure that I'm okay, and at least for now, right? But it is sort of this scary thing where it feels like free speech at this point has been curbed, and I think that there is a lot of fear amongst young people. And again, it kind of goes to show that I think on a greater scale, when it comes to policies in the U.S., there really is this very strange thing where when you criticize a foreign nation, all of a sudden that's now considered un-American. It's interesting, right? When you criticize a foreign nation and you also criticize tax dollars being sent to that nation, all of a sudden that's somehow not an America first position, which is, really interesting to me. But it's just, I would say there is a level of fear, but it's not as bad nearly, I think, at UT as we have seen, of course, at Columbia. And so we'll have to see what happens. But the next few weeks will be interesting, to say the least.
Yeah, go ahead, Elijah.
I would just chime in to say, at Atidna, we are an organization predicated on free speech, bringing together Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians to have dialogue about anything and everything pertaining to Israel and Palestine. We have noticed in Atidna spaces that Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian students are not coming anymore. They're explaining to us that even though we pride ourselves on keeping information shared in our spaces between us, not leaking it to anyone, ensuring the safety of our participants, they're still saying we can't come. We're afraid. And so we're noticing a repression even in our own spaces. And this arguably started occurring as soon as Trump signed his executive order on this issue. And so we are at UT, even though we're not on par with, say, Columbia, experiencing a de facto climate of suppression of free speech amongst Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim students, for sure.
Wow. Is it more, Elijah, what is the sentiment with the Jewish students? How are they feeling about this crackdown? It seems the targeting at this point it's solely on those who are pro-Palestine. It's not on the pro-Israel students. And I don't know what the ratio is of students on visas from the Middle East, how many of them are Arab versus how many of them are Jewish. I don't know. I mean, do you have like visa students here from Israel on visas, for example, that have no fear right now, or they're feeling afraid, or what is the sentiment?
I would say that there are some outspoken leftist Israelis, self-proclaimed anti-Zionist Israelis, who have expressed somewhat of a fear. But I think what we've noticed in the Jewish community is that we have a level of immunity. No matter what we do, we will not be repressed. And so I think most Jewish students who are outspoken about the Palestinian cause are actually utilizing their Jewish privilege to enter protests. I mean, we saw at Trump Tower, Jews for JVP going into these spaces, protesting, getting arrested, because they know that Jews will not be harmed through this process. And so I think most students are feeling outraged. I think many Jews also understand the history of repression of free speech against Jewish Americans in this country. Marco Rubio, the law he utilized to crack down on Khalil was actually a law created to deport Jews who were entering in the 1950s under suspected communist ties.
Wow.
And the precedent of deportations of political dissidents started to target Jews, started to target Jewish Americans. There was an event in the 1920s called the Palmer Raids. What this was Woodrow Wilson's DOJ going into Jewish spaces that were left-leaning politically, rounding them up, many of whom were American citizens, and deporting them to Russia under the claim that they were communists. And they were citizens. So the claim that they won't target citizens, I will debate heavily. But I think Jews overall were feeling a sense of necessity. Trump's doing this in our name. We have to come out, speak up for our Palestinian brothers and sisters. And if that means crackdowns, so be it. But I don't think we have the same fear as Arab or Palestinian students on this matter. Not even close.
Wouldn't it be ironic if the government started rounding up the Israeli students on visas who are anti-Zionist and saying, you're a problem and we got to send you, because you're saying you're pro-Hamas, you're terrorist, so we're going to send you back to Israel? Like,
exactly.
to
oh
what?
my gosh.
Yeah.
That would be a crazy scenario. But honestly, if you're saying this in the name of Jews, we'll have to call you anti-Semitic, I guess. That's going to be our little rebuttal. But I don't think they're going to target Jews, at all.
Elijah, tell us a little bit more about the history of that. I want to know more about when they targeted American citizens. I mean, we're all familiar with World War II and the internment of Japanese Americans. I mean, that certainly happened. And that's the thing that people need to be aware of, is that, if you support this for the non-citizens and say, well, you're, having a visa is a privilege or having a green card is a privilege, this government absolutely will crack down on American citizens. That has been done in the past. This is not unprecedented. It's actually happened. Tell us about some of the other times besides just the one we're all familiar with Japanese internment.
It's very interesting that you bring up Japanese internment, because Trump's DOJ recently revoked a precedent to not bring up the Korematsu case. The Korematsu case was the ruling where the Supreme Court ruled it illegal for Japanese Americans to be interned, put in detention camps. And Trump's DOJ said, we're ignoring that. We're going to allow that to be a precedent that we utilize in the courts to potentially detain Americans. I know it's a very scary thought.
Wait a minute. What? Wait. So Pam Bondi, what
Yes.
did she do?
Yep.
And how did this even come up? Like, what were they like? How did that even come up? In what context?
In the context of Latin American immigrants in this country, the detainments and putting people in quote unquote concentration camps. And so, Trump is going full blown fascistic with this, and there's no way to hide it. And they're revoking the worst parts of American history to do it. And it's an obscene and crazy reality we're living in.
And so if they revoked that because their excuse, and this is where it gets scary. This is why it's always, you can't just cherry pick what it's for. So their excuse, which a lot of Americans are for, right, is all the deportation of these of undocumented immigrants in the United States. So they're saying, well, we have to crack down on that. We have a border crisis, which most Americans agree there's a border crisis, got to do something about it. So people are willing to sacrifice rights, to throw precedents out, whatever, in order to crack down on what seems like an emergency for our security, our safety. It always comes down to that, like 9/11, right? And now, but of course they could use that. Now that they've thrown that out, they can use that for anything. It's not just going to be on, the border crisis. They will use it on people they deem to be terrorists or enemies of the state, which would be anybody who's anti-Israel, like any anti-Zionist, essentially.
And that's what I think this current case is with Khalil. He's a green card holder. And so I think Trump's testing the waters through Khalil. If he can get this through the courts, get him deported, that will be the biggest green flag for him to expand this measure tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. and Americans are next. If you're a citizen, that's not going to protect you. I'm a dual citizen. I have a genuine fear I might be deported to Canada. So as an American,
Well, Canada's becoming America. Don't you know, Elijah?
Right.
We're making it the 51st state. Don't worry about it.
Right.
Don't you know?
Yeah, I guess you got to give me citizenship then if you deport me. So it's just a crazy, absurd situation. But I think Khalil's case is testing the waters. If he can get this done, then other people will be next. A green card holder is higher on the totem pole than a visa holder. And so if he can get a green card holder deported, what is there stopping him from next targeting citizens? And that is a genuine fear I have.
Yeah, Jad, tell us about how the Arab students are feeling, like the fears that they're expressing to you, and or how you're even feeling. I mean, they are cracking. I do think Americans are next. I mean,
Hmm.
what else
Yeah.
is because they can't. I mean, the stupid thing about this whole thing is they're going after the students that are not American citizens. And it's like, what's the point of that? Because a bunch of Americans are also more Americans, way more Americans who are actual born American citizens are protesting than non-American citizens. And so all they're doing is inflaming, and we're seeing more protests break out now than we've seen previously. It's like they had quelled many of the protests and now they're back. I mean, what was even the point of this? This doesn't even make sense unless they plan on cracking down on everybody, because you can't just crack down on the visa holders or the green card holders and think that that's going to silence the protests. That's obviously not going to work, because the rest of us are going to get out on the streets even more so. So then they would have to come after us. I mean, they'd have to, and you would be the next in line, right, Jad? It wouldn't be me. I'm not Arab or from the Middle East, but it would be you.
Right. It's very frustrating. And I think what we have noticed over time, Arab and specifically Palestinian students, is obviously the double standard at UT especially, let's say, because at UT Austin, what we have seen is a completely different reaction from the administration when it comes to the Jewish and Israeli kids versus the Palestinian and Arab kids. I mean, anytime there's an incident, we've had incidents at our university where Israeli students or actually Israelis from even out of Austin have come to the school and harassed Palestinians, and there's no statement, no reaction. But when something in the reverse happens, there's immediately a reaction from the university, and we saw. Not only immediately after October 7th of 23 was there a statement by the university only talking about the Jewish half, but on the 1 year mark, October of this last year, again, there was this, another chance for the university kind of acknowledge some of the Arab and Palestinian suffering, and just nothing about it. In fact, I mean, our school, our largest Jewish organization on campus is known as Texas Hillel. It's the Center for Jewish Life. And this organization, which claims to be, for Jewish culture, they have really gotten away, in my eyes, with a lot of political stunts. They actually, last semester, they invited former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to campus to speak. I cannot imagine anything on an Arab or Palestinian, could you imagine us bringing in somebody from the Middle East, an Arab or Palestinian representative? I mean, it's not even a question, right? And so that's the kind of stuff that actually gets endorsed. And we have, countless organizations on campus. We have Longhorns for Israel, Students Supporting Israel, Texas Michelanu. We actually just introduced at our university an APAC chapter known as Longhorn PAC, which is it blows my mind. We're starting an APAC chapter at our university. And the kids are happy about it. I've attended Shabbat services actually recently with the Jewish community to try to really get their reactions. And while there have been many kids who I've had good conversations with, I will also be honest and say that there are many of them who I would say are pretty supportive of what Trump is doing in terms of this sort of Israel-Palestine dynamic. And, I was somebody, I didn't support Trump, and I wasn't a supporter of Kamala Harris either. I thought really both were just, trash options. But, I was still very fearful of the Trump administration. And I think that the Jewish students on campus, it's just a completely different world they're living in. I mean, it's not even in the same realm of the same universe that we're in, right? And so, as an Arab and Palestinian, my reality is just much different. And I really wish that the Jewish community would understand that. Actually, next month we have our Israel Block Party on campus, which is the largest on-campus celebration for Israel on any college campus in the U.S. And it's actually even partly funded by people at the university. Meanwhile, our Palestine Solidarity Committee is banned, right? So it's not even close, right? And so I would just summarize that by saying there's fear. There's definitely just a level of, I mean, it's just we're tired, right? We just want some sort of dignity, and also just the basic right to protest. And also, I'm a proud American as well, not just Palestinian. I don't want my tax dollars going to a foreign country that is committing a genocide. And
Right.
I think that should be an American first position, no matter what party or what ideology you follow.
Right. Elijah, it's been 10 months since I had you guys on the show last, and I'm curious if there's been any shift. When you were on last time, you said, I think I asked you the question about what the percentages of Jews who are supporting Palestine and against Israel, and you said back then it was most Jews on campus, most Jewish students are pro-Israel and still very much in support of that. Has anything changed in the 10 months?
I will say, I have had continual disappointment for the UT Jewish community. They have repeatedly done events like Israel Block Party. They've come out for overtly Zionist events on campus for Naftali Bennett, like Jad mentioned. So I've been disappointed with the UT community. But I would say around the nation, I've noticed an awakening. I've noticed many Jewish students, younger Jewish students, 25 and below, who have been coming out for Palestine that never before had. I look at the protests in New York. I think most of the students that are coming out are Jewish. I think a large percent of them are Jewish New Yorkers who are coming out in support of Palestine, whether that be at Columbia, NYU, other campuses. And so maybe not at UT, but definitely across the country, there has been a mass Jewish awakening, and it's made me very proud. I'm going to be at Columbia in 2 years, so hopefully, God willing, B'ezrat Hashem, inshallah, I can be part of those protests in the near future, championing for the rights of my Palestinian brothers and sisters.
Or they'll throw you in jail. I mean,
that's a badge of honor at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
I look at the protesters in Vietnam, in apartheid South Africa. A lot of these protests started at Columbia, and those people who got thrown in jail are heroes. They have statues now erected at Columbia for these people. And so, if you look at history 20 years down the line, the same will be said about Palestine. Those who stood up will get the commemoration they deserve for standing on the right side of history, and it's a historical precedent that will continue for the rest of time.
Are you guys Gen Z? Is that
That's
what
right.
You Okay. So, and according to the statistics, the younger the generation, the more support there is for Palestine. But so, Elijah, what you're saying is that it's still like, what percentage would you say today are like the Jewish Gen Zers are more pro-Israel versus pro-Palestine?
Good question. I would probably have to say, from the conversations I've had at the grassroots level, probably a third or more of Jewish students our age are anti-Zionist in nature. Now, it's an interesting construct because in Israel, it's reversed. The younger generation is the most radical. It's the most anti-Palestinian generation around. The people voting for Ben Gvir, for Smotrich, it's the youth. The older generation, which is ironic because it's the older generation that's responsible for the Nakba, the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza, they were the ones voting for Rabin and the liberal Zionists. I don't define myself as a liberal Zionist. I'm an anti-Zionist. But the ones in the land who are the most extreme Zionists, the ones calling for greater Israel, annexation of the West Bank and Gaza, are people our age. And they are the most extreme of extreme, and it's a very dangerous precedent. I get into the reasons why that is. I think it has a lot to do with post-Second Intifada, seeing the fallout of Oslo, just genuine loss of hope overall. But it's a bleak situation, especially amongst Israeli youth. They are so extreme, and it's very disheartening.
Yeah, when I was there, that is what was explained to me. I noticed that the older generation of Jews and Palestinians they were still hopeful that they could work it out. Yeah. They all remembered a time they were friends. The older they were, they remember working together, being together, spending time together. And it's the youth that they have had no interaction with one another. They've just been told the other side wants to kill you. That's when they erected the walls and all the signs of you'll get killed if you go into this area and it's not safe for you. And so they've been told from birth with no interaction. They don't have any memories to look back and say, oh, but we got along and I remember, and there's no, they don't have that. So it is interesting that the youth there and I did notice that the younger they were, I mean, I got spit on by like a 10-year-old kid that was angry.
Yeah. If you're anything other than like a conservative looking Jewish individual in Jerusalem, they'll do something like that. It's a very narcissistic Jewish supremacist depraved society. And the youth are indicative of that. I think it was Norman Finkelstein who made a comment about Netanyahu truly being the reflection of that society. And it's not even the whole society. I would say it's specifically the youth. Netanyahu as a whole is an inflection of those individuals because they're the most extreme of extreme. And it's sadly looking like it's going to continue for the near future for sure.
Yeah. But at least in your generation, you're saying that, a third are now anti-Zionist, or a third are very much questioning Israel and what Israel's doing, which is good. I mean, that's,
In America. Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it's still
In
not
America,
the
at least.
majority. It's still not enough.
Not even close. Yes.
Yeah.
Sadly, a lot of Jewish youth are still enculturated in overtly Zionist institutions. I went to Hebrew school. I was fed a very, very Zionistic narrative. I was told that Palestinians are terrorists. They all inherently want to kill Jews. We're still being fed this. It's the older generation in America, the boomers, the overtly Zionist individuals who are running these institutions. So it's very hard for the youth to break that cycle. But they do get active on social media. They see the videos of the genocide in Gaza. They see the apartheid in the West Bank. And so then they begin to question the narratives they were taught growing up, and that allows them to break the cycle. It's tough, but it is happening within our generation, and hopefully the generation that comes after us will be by majority anti-Zionist, and I think that is a trend we're seeing.
Yeah. Jad, there's a lot of people online that love these crackdowns of these students, and they champion and they say, well, they're terrorists, they support terrorists. Have you,
Yeah.
I mean, what's being classified as support for terrorism? That those that really are against Palestine that you've interacted with, you say you've had these sorts of negative conversations and whatnot. What are they saying is the terrorism? And are you seeing that sort of death to America? I mean, are students chanting death to America? Are you seeing this type of, we hate this country? I mean, what is it that people are afraid of?
It's so interesting. One comparison I had made is that, particularly with the older generations, there's sort of this mindset that, when Hamas had attacked on October 7th, that they saw it not even as an attack on Israel, but an attack on quote unquote American values. And that there's this fear that, if, it can happen in Israel, it could happen in the US. And in reality, I just think that that's kind of a wild comparison. But what I see is, unfortunately, to kids I speak to, really, if you're not just like abundantly standing with Israel, then you may get considered a terrorist. I mean, even just being a Palestinian, without any sort of political views, I've been told all sorts of things. I was wearing a keffiyeh one time, just as I was walking through, not even campus, but through right outside my apartment, and I had people yelling "F Hamas" and "Keep hating Jews" at me, which was, again, just wild. I had no interaction with these people whatsoever. It's interesting, right? Because whenever I am asked about Israel by Jewish kids, sometimes you try to kind of ease in the conversation, not just go full in on your views. And they will, I'll be honest, like a lot of them will tell me up front that while they're happy to talk with me, that some of them just flat out will say they can't trust me. And some of them will say that they don't like when I'm, in their sort of areas. If I'm at like a Texas Hillel for Shabbat service, for example, they do get uncomfortable. And no matter if you try to open up and show empathy, unfortunately, there's still a large part that is really just anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian. But when it comes to the youth, do I think that there are some dumb kids, for example, who have said dumb things and who have, made awful messaging? Yes, of course, that's, in any sort of group. I just think the vast majority of these kids who are protesting are upset at the fact that Palestinians are being slaughtered. They kind of have woken up to the idea of what Israel really is. It's not necessarily this beacon of democracy in the Middle East. It's actually, in many cases, just this brutal apartheid occupation state that, many people now are I mean, it's complete propaganda. When I go to the Jewish centers on campus, I mean, you literally, it is impossible to go without, to go in there without seeing promotions for Birthright, to go in there without seeing the organization Stand With Us, a pro-Israel group, and they have pamphlets in there for, and so it's almost impossible. I mean, if I were Jewish, I don't know how I would become removed from that, because it's just so in your face, right? If you go to Hebrew school, it's not just learning Hebrew and Jewish tradition. You are told very strictly from the Jewish people I know, you're told about the state of Israel and the importance, right? If you go to Torah study, for example, you're not told about biblical Israel solely. You're talking about the state of Israel and the survival in these rough neighborhood, right? And again, this idea, I'm very proud to be an American. My peers who are Palestinians and Arabs who are Americans, they love this country and living here. I'm very privileged to live in this country. I don't hate my country at all. I just wish that my country would do better. And unfortunately, for some reason now, I mean, look at Thomas Massey, right? And how he's now been threatened sort of by Donald Trump for a primary because he is a Republican who doesn't take AIPAC money and will say, actually, I don't want to be a part of the political theater for Netanyahu in Israel. And the
Hmm.
second he says that, there's this massive uproar from the Trump base, but also some pushback, which is nice. And that's good to see. And so I think the whole America hating idea is overblown. I think it's just empathy for Palestinians. I think it's seeing the true light of what Israel is and no longer, with social media now, we have access to instant information. And that's ultimately Israel's biggest weakness right now.
Yeah.
If I can,
Um,
if I can chime in
yeah,
real
go
quick
ahead.
to answer, it's also important to note that under the First Amendment, let's give the worst case scenario. Let's say that Khalil was overtly pro-Hamas, overtly pro-terrorism, and all these other negative attributes. I'm not saying he is by any measure. He's definitely not. This is all a smear. But even if he was, I would still argue he has a right to say that. And it's ironic that the Jewish community is coming out so in defense of the Trump administration's actions against Khalil, because it was actually the Jewish community that represented and defended a Nazi's ability to say those very things in Scoville, Illinois. It was the Jewish community that represented a literal leader of the Nazi community to spread Nazi propaganda in a majority Jewish area. They said, look, we don't necessarily love what you're saying, but we'll defend your right to say it. I think it's a very slippery slope when you say this speech is categorized as problematic and will be illegalized versus this speech is okay. That's a very slippery slope. And the Jewish community knows that. We had our lawyer in the ACLU defending a literal Nazi on this very principle. So I'm very disheartened to see any speech cracked down upon. ATIDNA,
Yeah.
as an organization, is a First Amendment organization at its core. Whatever your beliefs are, you are free to share it in our space. And Trump is preventing that from happening through his persecution of Palestinian, Arab, and Muslim students. And it's a sad state of affairs we're currently dealing with this administration. It's brutal.
Let me ask you guys each one last question, the same question, but Elijah, what do the anti-Zionist Jewish students that you talk to, what is their end goal? Like, what do they want to see happen with maybe? I mean, obviously, I think everybody that's anti-Zionist, whether they be Jewish or not, wants to see the end of this war, right? They want to see the end of the killing. But as far as their vision for Israel, what do these anti-Zionist Jews want?
It's in the name anti-Zionist. It would mean the end of the state of Israel. Now, this becomes a contentious topic even within anti-Zionist circles because there's two streams of anti-Zionism. One stream, the more radical stream, calls for the expulsion of all Jews from the land. Anyone who is a Zionist Israeli has to leave. There is the stream I subscribe to, and Jazz subscribes to it as well, that believes everyone should be able to live in the land under one state that isn't a Jewish state. And it's not necessarily an Arab state either, but it's one state that has an identity that represents everyone in the land equally. We can debate what that identity is. Some people have said, let's make it a Semitic state. Jews and Palestinians are Semitic peoples. Let's have one Semitic state from the river to the sea called Palestine. Some people say, oh, our roots go back to the ancient Canaanites, both Jews and Palestinians alike. Let's say it's Canaan, right? That's an equally representative state for both peoples. Our end goal is to end the Jewish supremacist state of Israel and create something that represents both peoples equally from the river to the sea. That is our end goal. And I think most people in the anti-Zionist camp subscribe to that, even though there's some more radical voices that will say, oh, so Israelis have to be expelled. I think that's a minority voice, but it is a voice within the anti-Zionist movement.
Yeah, and I heard that. When I was in Palestine, especially at the universities, it's when I went to the university that I heard the more radical ideas. Most of the students were still very much like, why can't we live together? Which, I didn't actually hear that from the older crowd. A lot of the non-students, most of the ones I spoke to, the Palestinians, were very like, we should have two equal states living side by side, and that's what we should do. The students were more, no, we need one state only. And then there were the radical ones that were like, all of them have to go. They don't belong here. They shouldn't. They should just absolutely be expelled out of here. But that was a very, obviously radical viewpoint. Jad, what is it that the anti-Zionist Arab students, Palestinian students that you talk to, what is their end goal? Do they want to see the eradication of Jews from the Holy Land? Are they looking, to get rid of them, send them all back to Russia or wherever?
First off, I don't think I've ever spoken to a Palestinian my age who just wants the Jews to be gone. In fact, we are, most of us have many Jewish friends, in fact, especially through doing a lot of this work. I mean, many of my friends now are Jewish anti-Zionists, right? And so, the common sentiment is the sentiment that I have, which is that we believe as Palestinians that we have an inherent right to live in the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. And we believe that all the people who live there should have equal dignity, equal rights, human, religious, political, legal rights, and that the state that encompasses those people, we believe that it shouldn't be any sort of a theocracy. It shouldn't be a Jewish exclusive or an Arab exclusive state. It should be a state for all its people. And whether that's called the Holy Land, the Promised Land, Canaan, Israel, Palestine, whatever we want to call it, for me, I'm far more concerned about human rights than I am a state's rights. And I think that's the common sentiment among Palestinians. We simply want to have dignity in our land. We want equal human rights. And we want to be able to return to parts of what's now Israel, that we've called home for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And ultimately, it's not about dehumanizing anybody or hating Jews. It's just about, humanizing ourselves and saying that we also have a right to this land, just as anybody else would.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see how, I mean, right now there's just obviously a full court press to silence any and all dissent. And you guys are right. This is a very scary thing. And, and like what you said, Elijah, when I was a kid growing up, my very first experience, and it made such an impression on me, my very first experience of understanding free speech was when, I'm from the state of Idaho, and we had a neo-Nazi Klan in the north when I was growing up, and they had a parade. And they were allowed their little dinky parade, and we would talk about it, and we were all appalled as kids, like, how is this allowed, that they're allowed to have a Nazi parade? Like, what in the world? And our teachers and our parents explained to us, look, we don't have to like it. We don't have to attend. No one will show up, but they have the right to have their parade. That's free speech. That's an American value. And that was taught to me in Idaho, a very Republican state, and a very, but we just learned, like, yeah, even the Nazis get to say the crap they want to say. And you know what? Nobody showed up to their parade. And I think their parade stopped after a while because like 10 people showed up. And that, it's ridiculous. But this crackdown is very, very scary. And it's, Elijah, the stuff you brought up about the historical and what Pam Bondi just recently did, that is even more frightening. And that should be a wake-up call to everybody that this isn't just going to affect the visa holders or the green card holders. They will use this against all of us. Because once you crack down on all the visa holders and the green card holders, and the protests are still going on, and there's still criticism of Israel, what are they going to do? That's when they're going to start coming after the rest of us because they have no other option. So very, very scary. I hope the best for your organization, Atidna International, which is a great organization, bringing together Jews and Israelis, Arabs and Palestinians in pursuit of dialogue, peace, solidarity. I think that is just such a great organization. And it's a shame that this type of crackdown is even harming the success of a peace-driven organization like yours. It should not be doing that. But that's the chill, that's the chilling effect. Yep. So right. we do have the Instagram for Atidna International down below. Also your guys's Instagram accounts and your X accounts, I think is what that is. Is there anything else you'd like people to do while you guys are here? Go anywhere, do anything?
I would just like to leave everyone with a call for action, if possible. Is that all right?
Yeah.
I would ask everyone, even though we're in a moment of mass suppression, if you are an American citizen, especially if you're Jewish, I'm speaking as a Jewish American, you have privilege still. Utilize that privilege to fight no matter what. They will come for your rights, but do not let them take them. Do whatever you can to prevent this government from making America into a completely fascist, dictatorial society. We need to stand up, whether you're Jewish, Arab, or Palestinian, because it may start with us, but it will surely come for the rest of us. There was I come from Holocaust survivors, and I was always taught the quote growing up that first they came for the communists, then they came for the Roma, then they came for the LGBTQ, then they came for the Jews, and there was no one left for me. Right? I was taught that quote growing up, and I think more than any other point in American history, it has value now. So do what you can to prevent that future from becoming reality.
Elijah, thank you so much. Jad, thank you guys so much. Great work that you guys are doing. Keep it up. And if you need to be bailed out of jail, let us know.
We'll keep in contact. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.